Alright y'all, welcome back to my channel, and for this video we're gonna do a review on all the diamond variants in this game. So this is gonna be an update to the same video that I did last year where I reviewed all the diamond variants in the game and kind of provide suggestions and tips and tricks for each of them on whether or not they are worth the 10 diamond keys. So we're gonna do that exactly the same, although I'm gonna be a bit more nuanced in my suggestions because I feel like most people really want to get that deeper review understanding rather than just a simple yes or no. So I'm trying to go a bit better, hopefully based on the feedback, and if you've noticed anything that's incorrect, please do feel free to correct me. So we're gonna start first with Annie as the first character. Annie is a multi-hit character, which is usually frowned upon because multi-hit characters deal too much combo hits and activate signature abilities, and unless they have tools for buff removal like Squigly with Curse, it gets really hard for them to be viable in the current meta. And Annie is no exception. However, there are certain fun things to do with her, but that's not the topic of the video. We're gonna review her variants. First up, we have Model Leader. Model Leader has been a quintessential defender in the game ever since she was released, and it still stays true up until now. She's a fearsome defender. Auto block with markability of blue shift is really insane and have stood against time. Model Leader is still worth the 10 diamond keys, but again, as a defender, I would not recommend you to invest in her if you're new to the game. She's definitely more of an investment for higher level players when they start playing Rifts, and Rifts become a huge mining resource for them. So if you're not playing Rift and you don't really care about Rift, Model Leader is not a variant you want to invest because she is purely a defender and doesn't really do anything aside from that. You can use her as a support, I guess, in the bench to clear debuffs, but let's be honest, immunity is a much better support, and Surgeon General provides that on top of regen as well. So Model Leader, worth the 10 diamond keys, absolutely, but only if you're a high level player and you play Rift. If not, then she doesn't really do much for you. Next is Firebranded. Firebranded is a typical Fire Diamond variant where all she does is huge damage. And she does have a lot of damage because she gains Enrage really easily through special moves or blockbusters while in Star Power mode, and her charge attacks gets rid of that Enrage while inflicting stun and heavy bleed for 2 seconds per stack consumed. It's a really strong ability, and there's some combo loops you can do with her just because of that stun, allowing you to kill the opponent really fast. Again, her main stick is damage and she does it really well, so if you're a new player and you really need a variant that can deal a lot of damage, Firebranded is a pretty good option. Is she worth the 10 diamond keys? Only if you need a high damage variant, but we'll soon later see that there are actually a lot of variants that can play this role. So if you're looking for a variant like a must-have variant, Firebranded is not one of them, but she does a lot of damage as being a Fire Diamond variant should, and she can start wrecking stuff in prize fights. Finally, we have Starshine, and Starshine, unfortunately, is not really a good variant just because she requires a lot of time in the stage before she actually does anything. The first ability requires 20 seconds to gain Immunity and Blessing. I think that's fine. Immunity is a strong buff for sure, and Blessing, well, it saves you from dying, which is nice I guess, but is not much to be seen. But the second ability is where she's supposed to shine the most. She gains permanent precision after 30 seconds as the active fighter. Precision is a really strong buff, especially in Rift battles when you're facing against a lot of defenders with crazy signature abilities. Being able to ignore their signature abilities through a precision hit is really strong, and that's why Parasoul is really good. However, Starshine requires 30 seconds in the field, and that is just way too long of a wait. Unfortunately, time in Rift battles is very precious and you want to kill the opponent as soon as you can. So because of this, Starshine is unfortunately not worth the 10 diamond keys in my opinion. However, if she does get buffed to say 15 or 20 seconds to gain that permanent precision, I could see her doing some really cool and insane combo loops, like Destruction Pillar can get rid of the opponent's health, 10% of their health through a critical hit, and precision guaranteeing that critical hit can be a very powerful thing to combo off. Overall though, Starshine is a really cool concept, but the waiting time is just a bit tad too high and too precious to make her work. There are other variants and other characters that can gain precision while still dealing a lot of damage that we'll see later on. Moving on, we have Beowulf. So Beowulf is a grappler, which means he has access to a lot of command grabs. Command grabs are special moves or blockbusters that you can just tap and it immediately connects to the opponent and deal damage. It cannot be blocked, which makes Beowulf's kit in general pretty strong. However, the caveat is that it cannot crit. But being able to be super aggressive with your moves is a big plus and makes Beowulf a pretty good character with a pretty good kit to start with. So we'll start with Darkmight, and Darkmight has unfortunately not been buffed, and my opinion continues to be the same with the previous video as well. Darkmight is, I'm just gonna go straight to it, is not worth your 10 diamond keys. Because first of all, you need teammates to be defeated to get that bonus damage. Needing things to die first in order to like do something is generally bad. Unless it's some kind of a safety net, because that means at the start of the match you don't really have an active signature ability yet. And you kind of have to work for it in a negative way to get that bonus damage. So definitely not a good start. Second signature ability is more interesting. Tier 3 blockbusters have a 35% chance to instantly defeat opponents. But again, if Beowulf has less than 50% health. So my biggest problem with Darkmight is that both of the conditions for his 2 signature abilities are in a negative light. It only triggers when you're losing, which is not a great concept for a variant in general. At the start of the match, he basically does not have any signature ability, and you kind of have to be losing to actually gain benefits, which is not right, especially in Rift battles where defeated teammates reduces your points, having less health reduces your points, so it's actually not optimal at all. Darkmight is unfortunately just a terrible variant in concept, and I wish he gets buffed or gets a bit of a tweak or just a rework in general. Still hoping for that because, come on, it's a Batman palette. He needs something to be good. Next we have Snakebite, and Snakebite right off the bat is a pretty good variant, especially with his high attack stat. What I like about Snakebite is that his buffs are actually quite unique for Beowulf. Haste is part of Beowulf's kit, but gaining permanent haste is definitely something special here. And the 3 stacks of evasion and 5 stacks of barrier allow Snakebite to be quite elusive. It's really hard to punish him because of that. Once you have Snakebite start rolling his signature abilities, it basically becomes really easy to just loop your opponent to death without suffering any damage whatsoever because of those barriers and those evasions, which helps you prevent to get punished. Overall, Snakebite is carried hard in terms of damage from his base attack, but because his base attack is quite high, it's still pretty acceptable and it's still pretty good, but his utility is definitely more on the blockbuster finish and having that safety net from the barrier and evasion. In high price fights, he might struggle a bit with damage since he has no way of gaining enrage, but regardless, damage isn't really what you're looking for from Snakebite either. So overall, worth the 10 diamond keys because of what he has to offer, and Beowulf's kit being full of command grabs make it very easier to pick up by beginners. Definitely recommended. And finally we have Beast King, and Beast King is one of my favorite variants in the game. I've actually made a whole showcase on him, and his effect is really strong. First of all, he can inflict Wither and Curse, which doubles up as meter and buff control already in one variant, and then he gains further more bonus damage for each debuff stack applied to either fighter. So not only does he have buff control and meter control, but he also have a lot of damage going for him, which is crazy. Beast King is my favorite variant and he's really strong, but the caveat is that you need to deal at least 10% of the opponent's max health from a single hit. Beast King is a variant that you really need a lot of investment on to be good, and you need to roll a lot of attack and piercing to be viable. If you can't deal at least 10%, he doesn't really have much going on for him. So that is going to be his main limitation, whether or not you have the good moves to roll a lot in attack, piercing, maybe even some crit damage to further bolster his damage, just to activate his abilities. But in the right scenarios, he can definitely start steamrolling teams. You can just watch my video of the gameplay there, and it's definitely worth the 10 diamond keys. I love him in prize fights. He can just start steamrolling teams so fast. That is insane. Love Beast King, worth the 10 diamond keys, but you need a good moveset to make him work. Next character we have Big Ben, the archetypal tank in this game. However, Big Ben's kit is a bit outdated and really old, so it leaves a lot to be desired. I've actually made a full video on why Big Ben's kit needs an update, and I hope he does get some buffs to his kit in the future. With that said though, we're gonna review his 2 diamond variants, which are both defenders, and they will rely purely mostly on their own signature abilities than what Big Ben has to offer. So first up we have Heavy Metal, and Heavy Metal is a water element, which already means that he has some synergy with Frost Armor as a catalyst. Furthermore, he also has an innate ability to gain armor, which again, more synergy with Frost Armor for that reflect damage, and being a big band, he also has massive HP to back him up. Heavy Metal is again a defender and it's not something you want to invest on early on if you're early into this game, but if you're in late game, it's a bit hard to justify investing in Heavy Metal when there's so many other better water variants like Model Leader as a prime example, Plot Twisted, and Blue Screen. If you're trying to make like a full Frost Armor base where all your nodes are Frost Armor, then Heavy Metal can have a spot there, but he is definitely counterable and countering him is not hard to do. So just keep that in mind. Heavy Metal is a good substitute if you don't have anything better, but if you do, then I see very little reason to invest him. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. Next we have Dream Band, and I think Dream Band is better than Heavy Metal. He is light element, which means he has a lot of synergy with the light catalyst, lightweight, and last words. Furthermore, his main shtick is that when he gets knocked down, he resets the timer of all active buffs and gain immunity for 15 seconds. That is actually really huge. Comboing against Big Band is not easy because he's quite a big guy, so he's gonna get knocked down quite often, and getting that innate immunity is really strong. This game is an RPG game, so there are other strategies aside from just direct damage to kill your defenders, and Big Band is pretty susceptible to bleed effects. Because once you get bleed, how much HP you have doesn't really matter, but Dream Band having that immunity completely negates that. Dream Band I think is slightly better than Heavy Metal just because of this ability, but I think he falls slightly in a similar boat. I do have to say though, light variants have slightly been more unpopular as of late, water element being the more defensive strategy, and like Heavy Metal, I think Dream Band can easily be replaced by other light element variants as well, like Dreadlock, Splitting Image, That's All Folks. Those are still quite viable, and Dream Band I think is not far off, but he's still quite easy to counter. So is he worth the 10 diamond keys? Personally, I really like Dream Band, so I'm gonna say yes. However, again, he is a defender, so not recommended for beginners, and for high level players, he's not really a big threat to face, so do keep that in mind. Next character we have Cerebella, and Cerebella is very similar to Beowulf in that she has some command grabs which allows her to be quite aggressive, and again, command grabs cannot be blocked, which is really nice to have in this game. She's a bruiser type character, so most of her damage are like single hit but huge chunks of damage. In terms of utility and modifiers, she can inflict armor break, which is a really nice way to remove armor while also increasing the amount of damage the opponent takes. But outside of that, she doesn't really have anything else going on for her. So most of her utility will rely on the signature abilities of the diamond variants. So first up we have Heavy Handed, and Heavy Handed is quite a unique variant because her signature ability basically just revolves around her charge attack to get those 5 stacks of enrage and deal this one huge hit to the opponent. Honestly, Heavy Handed is more of a gimmick variant rather than anything useful, so I'm just gonna straight out say it. If you want damage, there are better other alternatives to use, and Heavy Handed, while the concept is cool, and I think it's fine for a variant to have this concept, in terms of utility and whether or not it's useful, it really isn't. I do wish Heavy Handed got buffed though, so that aside from gaining and flinching, maybe she also gains a precision. That could be a really unique thing for Cerebellas to have because no other Cerebellas have access to precision, but as it stands at the current moment, Heavy Handed is not worth your 10 diamond keys unless you just like to spam charge attacks for some reason. There are better damage dealing variants out there. And next we have Star-Spangled, and my opinion with Star-Spangled is still the same as I did last year, in that she is also not worth the 10 diamond keys. She can inflict armor break when either fighter breaks a throw, and that is quite useful actually, but Cerebella can already inflict armor break from Battle Bud, and Battle Bud is a special move that is quite often used in Cerebella, so it's kind of redundant to have this signature ability. And the second ability revolves around armor break to inflict stun to the opponent if the opponent is in the air. It's quite a bizarre condition for a potential combo loop. However, Star-Spangled just does not have the damage capacity to actually make use of that loop very well. And it also forces her to use some really awkward movesets, which again is more of a gimmick thing than anything remotely useful. So overall, Star-Spangled is not worth your keys, and I wish she could get buffed. The next character we have Double, and Double is a high risk, high reward character. Her ability mostly revolves around transmuting to a certain element and then gaining a lot of benefits by inflicting critical hits to inflict chaos. Her Marquee ability, which is really powerful as it can deal random bits of debuffs for every critical hit. That is mostly Double's use in the metagame, and so far critical hits has not been a popular strategy as of late, especially when they don't have any precision, and the RNG aspect has made her a bit more inconsistent to be used in the meta. Regardless though, I think Double is a really cool concept as a character, and we'll just get straight on to her variants. The first is Jawbreaker, and my opinion on Jawbreaker has changed over last year. Last year I think I overestimated her abilities just a bit more, but now after having some more thought, reading her feedback, and also actually getting a Jawbreaker, my opinions on her has completely changed. First of all, she transmutes and gains random buffs for 7 seconds. Now I think the 7-second buff is a bit too short to be that useful, especially when you're transmuting. And furthermore, the biggest part is her second signature ability, where she gains 20% bonus damage for each buff applied to Double. Now I just realized this lately, someone just told me that the 20% bonus damage is from her base attack. While Jawbreaker does have a staggering 15k attack, 20% of that is about 3k bonus attack. So every buff she gets, she gains an additional 3k attack. This could be quite powerful if her transmutation ability and her ability to gain buffs based on that transmutation is more than 7 seconds. But I think given that it's only 7 seconds, it's quite hard to keep more than say 4 or 5 buffs per game. You'll really have to use more supportive characters like Surgeon General or even Sketchy to gain that extra bit of damage. So overall, Jawbreaker has not been up to what I thought she was. I definitely overestimated her last year, but for beginners, I still think she's a pretty okay diamond variant to invest in. Her main role will purely be more on damage, which is again shared by a lot of diamond variants in this list. You'll see this later on. And next we have Heart of Darkness. So Heart of Darkness, my opinion on her is still the same from last year. She is more of a niche variant. You don't really want to use her that much, especially in like Rift battles. While being able to get the signature ability of an opponent sounds really cool, in practice it kind of falls short. It's very rare that you could steal an ability and actually make use of it really well. A lot of signature abilities in this game revolves around a character's character ability. So just as an example, Snakebite's ability revolves a lot on hype mode. And Heart of Darkness has really no reason to steal an ability like that because she can't get into hype mode. So there's a lot of things like that. I think what is really cool about her though is her second signature ability. I think that's like the reason you want to use Heart of Darkness, especially in a competitive format, is a 100% chance when Double's opponent tags out for all active opponent debuffs to transfer to the incoming opponent. That could be pretty strong when you're facing against like Splitting Image from the bench. However, again, Heart of Darkness, she will mostly rely on Chaos for her Marquee ability to inflict those debuffs, and her first signature ability, while it sounds really powerful, you'll soon find out that it's a bit more impractical to use, and for the most part, you're never gonna use that ability. So is she worth the 10 diamond keys? Probably not, just because she's a bit more niche, but that doesn't mean she's bad, because she does have 13k attack to back her up, and Chaos as a Marquee ability while also being a dark element is also something unique to her, which means you do not have to transmute when you're against tough light variants like Assassin's Greed, Dreamband, Dreadlocks, and so forth. And finally, we have Creature of Habit, and this is again the opposite of what I thought from last year. While Jawbreaker, I kind of overestimated her a bit, Creature of Habit, I severely underestimated her, because the ability to gain a stack of Enrage every 2 seconds while a blockbuster is fully charged is really strong. She can deal a lot of burst damage. Enrage is basically an extra bonus 20% bonus damage, so it's similar in a way to Jawbreaker's second ability, but she does not rely a lot on transmutation or RNG, and furthermore, she also has the ability to gain Miasma for 10 seconds while not blocking if her blockbusters are not fully charged. So both of her abilities synergizes well against each other. She either gains Miasma or she gains Enrage. Both are really good offensively, and just makes Creature of Habit a really strong burst damage dealer. Her Enrage does get removed when she uses a Blockbuster, but I feel like most of her damage will come from her special moves like Cilia Slide, Hornet Bomber, and Luger Replica. So all in all, Creature of Habit is definitely one that I would recommend better than Jawbreaker now. I think my opinion on them has switched. I see Creature of Habit as a more powerful and faster burst damage dealer, and yeah, Enrage and Miasma are just really good buffs. Now that we're done with Double, we're coming off next with Eliza. And Eliza as a character has a lot of things going on for her. She has one of the best kits in this entire game because she can literally do almost everything. She has access to Chaos Banish, which is the best buff control tool in this entire game, Uppercut for stun, command grabs, a burst that can inflict curse, which is again another form of buff control. She can also deal heavy bleed in case her attack stat is not high enough, and plenty more. She just has a lot of things going on for her, which makes her really ideal for the competitive scene, such as Rift battles. In prize fights, she does struggle a bit because of her lack of damage, but you know what? In this list, there's a lot of variants where their sole purpose is just to deal damage. So we have enough variants that can deal damage, but not enough variants that can actually control buffs in this game. Now I do have to say that Eliza is slightly difficult to use. She's a bit more technical, but once you get the hang of her, she's gonna be a really powerful asset in your team. So what Eliza has to offer, her kit alone is already pretty insane, and her diamond variants are actually also both very good. So first up, we have Standout. So the biggest thing about Standout is her second signature ability, where the buff gained by the opponent has a chance to be completely removed without her actually doing anything. This ability alone puts Standout above all the other Elizas in terms of buff control. She is the master of buff control because she can even remove permanent buffs like Auto Block from Model Leader because she removes it before it activates, which is really strong. Standout is a top tier buff control variant with also the highest attack stat of all Elizas. Now that is not saying much because Eliza is not known for a high attack stat, but it is still high enough for her to deal some respectable damage. Her first ability is also really nice, giving her some regeneration, which is really cool and makes her pretty much a very ideal variant for Rift battles. There's nothing much else to be said here. I think everyone can agree that Standout is one of the best diamond variants in the game, and if you get her, you should be very happy about it. Next, we have Mummy Dearest. And ever since last year where I reviewed her, Mummy Dearest have gotten a buff. She is now much better than before, but her biggest buff is the fact that she now gains immunity when entering segment mode. Immunity is a huge buff. It allows her to be completely immune to all debuffs, and it's really strong for Rift battles where there's a lot of catalysts and modifiers that gives you debuffs like Block Busted. Now I do have to say, Mummy Dearest is still a bit of a risky variant. Using a special move sacrifices 10% of her health while gaining her meter and heavy regen for 10 seconds. So it is a net positive in regeneration, but because of this ability, you're sort of limited in your gameplay. You can't just spam special moves as much as you'd like. You kind of have to be a bit more smart about it, and that's basically her limitation. However, if you're really good at playing this game and you know how to time your special moves correctly, Mummy Dearest could be a very good buff control variant for your team as well, thanks to that immunity. Overall, I think she has gotten so much better this time around. She's definitely more usable, and again, immunity for 30 seconds is kind of crazy and is her main advantage over the other Elizas in this game. She's definitely one of the hardest ones to use, but if you can use her properly, she's definitely a huge asset for your team. Coming up next is Filia, and Filia is all about speed. While she does not have that much of an attack, she relies on Bleed as her primary form of offensive advantage. Bleed is quite a powerful debuff because at high prize fight streaks, when the opponent has about 500% bonus health, you can simply inflict Bleed, and because Bleed doesn't really care about the amount of HP your opponent has, they can get willed down really fast. Ringled Spike in particular is, I think, Filia's best special move, and the fact that you can guarantee bleeds out of it is quite insane. With that said though, we're covering 2 of Filia's diamond variants, Class Cutter and Djinn Frizz. Now for Djinn Frizz, because we're relying a lot on Filia's kit for the most part, Djinn Frizz's ability is more seen as a bonus more than anything. She gains 3 random buffs for 5 seconds, obviously that's not something you can rely upon. However, her main appeal comes from her second signature ability, where she has a 33% chance to convert those buffs into permanent enrage, which further increases her damage output. Djinn Frizz already has the second highest attack stat in this game at 15.5k, so that is already pretty crazy. So the fact that you can even get permanent enrage is even crazier. However, personally from my own gameplay, I found that betting on the second signature ability is a bit risky and is not something you can consistently get. So while Djinn Frizz is a pretty good variant overall, she mostly relies on Filia's base kit to really do anything. Leech as a market ability is really powerful, her high attack stat allows her to deal some damage, and Bleed as an alternative way to defeat the opponent is also really strong with Ringlet Spike. Her ability alone is more of a bonus, you don't really rely on them too much, but it is there if you happen to get those permanent enrage. Next we have Class Cutter, and my opinion on Class Cutter have really improved ever since I played with Djinn Frizz, because now I finally understand that heal block inflicted by Class Cutter matters so much more. Djinn Frizz can struggle a lot with variants that heals very fast, especially in high streaks. She will have to rely on those enrage stacks to deal any damage, but as I've said before, it can be a bit inconsistent. Class Cutter, however, just needs to inflict heal block, and those variants can no longer heal, and then she can just kill them from her own base attack damage, which is not too shabby either. She sits at 13.5k, which is only a 2k difference, which is not really that noticeable, especially when you take into account the fact that you can also inflict Death Mark and heal block from her abilities. If I have to say, I think Class Cutter is better than Djinn Frizz. This is something I regret from my top diamond variants video. I should have put Class Cutter there. I am now fully convinced of that. However, both are still very solid diamond variants, and if you have to choose, Class Cutter is superior, but Djinn Frizz is not too shabby either. After Filia, we have Fukua, Filia's clone. Although they look similar, their playstyle is very different. Fukua is more of a mid-range character. She has access to projectiles, but then she can also get close in on you and deal these insane combos really well with her blockbusters and special moves. She has access to 1 command grab blockbuster, which I think is super good because it also heals her, and she also has ways to gain meter just by landing hits through her special moves. So unlike Filia, she has an easier way to land blockbusters and harass the opponent. So out of the 3 diamond variants you have, we'll start first with Splitting Image. Splitting Image is again very similar to Model Leader in the fact that she's a top tier defender even now, even still. When she was released, she was insane, and today she is still quite crazy because of that first signature ability. While her health is lower than the opponent, she gains permanent immunity and recovers 2% health per second. This ability is really crazy. If you can't kill Splitting Image, that means your offensive stat is lacking, or their defensive stat is just superior. Having permanent immunity is super strong, and being to passively regain health is even crazier. Her second ability is more of a bonus depending on the opponent she faces, so it can mostly be ignored for the most part. Regardless, if you play Rift, if you're not a beginner, if you're a high level player, Splitting Image is definitely a variant you want to invest in to boost the defensive capabilities of your base. I do have to say that light variants have gotten a bit unpopular these days, but she is still a very strong defender to have in this game. So now let's get on to the offensive variants, starting with Shadow Puppet. Shadow Puppet shares the same attack stat as Djinn Frizz, so she has quite a ridiculous attack stat at 15k, and furthermore, her abilities are also really unique. So we'll start with her second signature ability first, because that's mostly what she is known for. Once per match, when suffering a hit that will be fatal, she freezes time and gains 5 stacks of miasma for 7 seconds. So this ability is mostly a safety net, so if you make a mistake and you accidentally die, the ability can proc, preventing you from actually dying, and then the stacks of miasma gives you an opportunity to regain your health back while also gaining some meter back as well. It's a really nice ability, but definitely not something you strive for. So we'll go next to the first signature ability, where she has a 5% chance on hit to reset the timers of all Fukua's buffs and all the opponent's debuffs. That is a really cool utility ability. First of all, as a Fukua, you have access to a lot of miasma, so you can reset miasma continually through this ability. But if you pair her with Sketchy or Surgeon General as well for support, the ability to reset all those buffs and debuffs makes her really strong. Now I do have to say that it is a 5% chance, which is quite low, but that's for obvious reasons because the effect is kind of crazy. I won't say too much about this, but Shadow Puppet is a really strong variant to have. She has the attack stat to back it up. She has Fukua's kit, which is also pretty good as well. Plenty of regeneration and meter gains to spam blockbusters makes her really ideal. And of course, the ability to reset buffs and debuffs is a nice cherry on top that can spiral into absolutely crazy things. Finally, we have Dream Demon, and this is a variant which I'm still not sure about. She shares the same attack stat as Class Cutter at 30.5k, so she definitely deals good enough damage. Furthermore, her abilities inflict permanent deathmark and gain Enrage, which is quite a good combination together, but she needs to stay in the field while facing the same opponent for 15 seconds. My immediate opinion is that this is a bit too long, but perhaps I could be wrong. Again, I'm still not sure, I don't have her to test this out, but I think she has potential. Her second signature ability synergizes with the first by having a chance for her dash attacks to be completely unblockable if the opponent is suffering from deathmark. Now that is quite cool, especially when Fukua already has Deathmark in her kit through Drillationship, so the second signature ability can already be activated just from her special moves and not from her first signature ability. Dream Demon definitely has potential here, I can't say for sure. She's definitely better than some offensive variants, however, she's also not like super amazing. The unblockable dash attacks honestly doesn't feel as impactful when I play Fukua because Fukua's base kit and gameplay is already really good. Her intercept is one of the best in the game, so it's really easy to intercept with her, so perhaps the unblockable dash attack won't really have too much of an impact. Overall, I'm gonna say that Dream Demon is worth the keys. She definitely has the damage to back it up, the attack set to back it up. 15 seconds for me might be too long, but I could be completely wrong about this. Really excited to see how she actually performs. I feel like a crit based build on Dream Demon could do absolute wonders for her thanks to that death mark, and unblockable dash attacks, while I'm not thoroughly that impressed, is still really good to have. But I do wish she got slightly more stuff out of this. For example, 2 stacks of Enrage instead of 1, or instead of permanent death mark, just a normal death mark but faster than 15 seconds. Just slight tweaks to make her even stronger. Next we have Miss Fortune, and I'm not gonna lie, Miss Fortune is a character that I do not have a lot of experience with because her main feature is that she's able to go into this headless mode, and it's very technical, but it can perform some insane combo loops and just trap the opponent in infinite combos. It's really powerful if you know how to do it well. I have not taken the time to learn it, so I cannot say much in that regard. Unfortunately, both of Miss Fortune's diamonds do revolve around this headless mode. So if you're a beginner player and you have no interest in learning headless at all, you might want to skip this part and go to the next character because none of Miss Fortune's diamonds will probably do you any good. But if you are interested in learning headless, then please do carry on. First up, we have Furry Fury. And this variant is like any other Fire Diamond variant where she's all about damage. As I've said before, there's a lot of variants in this game which simply revolves only about damage, and Furry Fury is kind of one of them. She does have Miss Fortune's kit to back her up, namely Precision, Death Mark, Armor Break, so she can deal even more damage while also having that precision utility to ignore signature abilities. So her first signature ability is really simple. Head hits have a chance to inflict bleed for 10 seconds, and her second signature ability, she gains an Enrage while near an opponent that is suffering bleed. So obviously the first signature ability is meant to be that source of bleed, but you can also use hit pause to inflict bleed, but since you need to be close to the opponent, headless mode fits this playstyle really well, and she can start snowballing fights really fast. There's nothing much to say about Furry Fury, she just deals a lot of damage with access to Miss Fortune's kit behind her back. If you like playing Miss Fortune and you like headless mode, Furry Fury is just up your alley, but if you don't, then Furry Fury is not a variant you kinda want to invest in. She's harder to use, and if you just want damage, there are other simpler variants that can provide you the damage that you want. Next we have Windstalker, and Windstalker has gotten a buff from last year. Now she drains blockbuster meter per second while the opponent is near Miss Fortune's head. Again, there's an emphasis here on headless mode, but the ability to drain meter is really strong. Miss Fortune's head is always going to be near the opponent, and she's going to have a really easy way to deal blockbusters. Her second signature ability is more of a bonus. Inflict Deathmark, disable tag-ins, and doom for 15 seconds each when an opponent's health drops below 35%. So if you've already reduced the opponent's health to 35%, you're kind of already killing them anyway, so the doom is kind of pointless, but the ability to disable tag-ins can be quite useful as a surefire way that you're definitely gonna defeat this opponent. She definitely has more utility than Furry Fury, which is just all about damage, but I'm not gonna comment too much on Windstalker because again, headless mode is not something I'm proficient in, although I've heard that Windstalker is actually a really good diamond once you know how to use headless mode because that drain meter is really strong. Then we have Painwheel, and Painwheel is the archetypal glass cannon character. She has the highest attack stat of all the characters in this game, but also the lowest HP in this entire game. She has a lot of tools to make her really useful in offense, whether that's heavy bleed, armor break, critical hits, death mark, she has it all. So you can expect Painwheel variants to just hit hard out of the blue with a single move. What is interesting though, Painwheel's diamond variants actually provide an additional utility that makes them stand out from the other Painwheel variants in this game. We'll first start with Flytrap. Flytrap has the highest attack stat of the entire cast and characters and variants in this game with over 16k attack stat. That is fitting for a Painwheel, and she can further gain more damage for each defeated fighter, so there's a potential to snowball fights here. However, the bonus damage is calculated through her base attack. With 16.7k, 25% bonus damage means you get an additional 4k bonus damage for every defeated fighter. What makes Flytrap special though is her second signature ability, which allows her to gain 5 stacks of regen after defeating an opponent. This is an absurd amount of regeneration and makes Flytrap a really strong offensive variant with an inbuilt safety net once she kills that one enemy. But outside of this, she doesn't really provide any other utility. And low-key, I have been slightly disappointed with Flytrap as of late. I think she's still good for beginners if you manage to pull her early. She's definitely gonna carry you far. But again, she's just one of those variants that hits hard, heals a lot, and that's about it. Nothing else. And then we have Neuromancer with an absolutely insane ability that can drain 10% blockbuster meter for each non-blockbuster hit blocked by the opponent. Furthermore, 15% of damage dealt from a blockbuster is also suffered by the opponent's teammate. Using Neuromancer feels like you're playing this game with a cheat code because you can just recklessly tap and then your blockbuster 3, which is unblockable, is fully charged up and you can start spamming it so fast. And of course, as a Painwheel, she has 13k attack stat as well to back her up. And the second signature ability actually provides some additional utility. Again, signature abilities like Immortal Fiber or Plot Twisted or Killjoy that activates upon their death, you can actually ignore this by tagging them out with a sliver of health left and then use a BB3 and kill them in the bench. This is a strategy that has been employed by high-level Rift players in the past, so she definitely has a unique niche that puts her above all the other Painwheel variants. In my opinion, Neuromancer is definitely one of the best diamond variants you can invest in this game. And then we have Parasoul, and Parasoul is a character that I play a lot with. She's really fun to play, deals tons of damage, and her kit is also pretty loaded with access to immunity and precision taunts. Those two are really strong and makes her an ideal pick for most situations against most opponents. Her weakness is of course she does not have any really good buff control. Cannot be bounced is one way, but it's not reliable, and she also lacks regeneration. But overall, Parasoul's base kit is really strong and her variants don't really need much to be good. So the first diamond variant, we have Somersault, and she covers one of Parasoul's weakness, which is buff control. Opponents lose 1 buff and 3% health every 2 seconds while near a tier. This first signature ability is what makes Somersault really good. The ability to get rid of buffs just by being near a tier is really powerful, and you can spam a lot of tiers really easily just by playing Parasoul normally. Her second signature ability is more of a bonus than anything. When you detonate at least 3 tiers at once, you remove all debuffs on yourself and gain 5 stacks of precision, and the detonate tiers also deal 100% bonus damage. Here's the thing, you typically do not want to detonate tiers when you're playing Parasoul because you're most likely gonna use crit mass as your marquee ability, which increases your crit damage based on the number of tiers in the field. So the optimal playstyle is to keep the tiers in the field and just go ham and deal tons of crit damage through her normal blockbusters and special moves. What is really cool about the second signature ability though is the ability to remove all debuffs. However, Parasoul does have an immunity taunt, so you might not even need this ability, and just like the 5 stacks of precision, Parasoul also has access to precision taunts. These 2 taunts are also in Somersault's kit, which makes me believe that Somersault is a bit overloaded with stuff, but it doesn't matter. Most of her main role is her first signature ability to get rid of buffs, and she does it really well, while also having really good damage to back it up. Somersault is, in my opinion, one of the better diamonds to invest in. Next we have Risky Ginger, and last year I feel like I was a bit harsh on Risky Ginger, but now, ever since I know how much Deathmark amplifies your damage, it kind of makes sense for her to be a bit slower than Primed. Honestly, I still think Primed is a more faster choice and a cheaper choice as well. Risky Ginger is more technical. You gotta hit a dashing opponent, and that is sometimes hard to do when the AI sometimes just runs to you and immediately blocks. But being able to inflict Deathmark for 15 seconds is quite crazy, and of course the enrage stacks making unblockable blockbusters is quite insane. She definitely has a higher damage potential than all other Parasouls, but to get there she needs a bit more work. Like most other Fire Diamond variants, her main shtick is just damage. Pure damage, although she does have unblockable blockbusters, which gives her a slight edge. Once you're at 3 stacks of enrage, she can do some crazy infinite loops, which is insane. Is she worth 10 diamond keys? For a beginner, I would not recommend it. I would still recommend Prime because she's easier to use, you can get her from prize fights, and she's also a bit more consistent. Only invest in Risky Ginger if you really like Parasoul's playstyle. You're willing to spend those keys and coins for a version of Prime that can deal more damage, although slower. I think that's gonna be my final comment on Risky Ginger. Then we have Peacock, and Peacock is an odd character. She revolves a lot on projectiles while also having team-wide support, which makes her quite useful in supportive roles. Her diamond variants, however, are slightly more unique. The first one we have Freeze Frame, and Freeze Frame still relies on projectile to inflict slow and wither for 15 seconds. These debuffs basically means Freeze Frame is the ultimate meter control variant. However, just controlling meter won't actually actively win you games, it prevents you from losing. That's why the second signature ability deals damage based on Peacock's attack and stuns them for 3 seconds, allowing you to start your combos and deal more damage through your blockbusters and special moves. Overall, there's not much to be said about Freeze Frame. I think she's a really good meter control variant, but she doesn't offer a lot of other utility that would make her a top tier choice for a diamond. Next we have Dreamcatcher, and Dreamcatcher is an even more odd case. Her first signature ability have the chance to stun the opponents through special moves and tag-ins. And then while facing a stunned opponent, she gains precision and her teammates gain blockbuster meter and health. Not gonna lie, Dreamcatcher feels more of a secondary attacker role more than a main carry. The best use case I've seen for Dreamcatcher is to use Eliza's uppercut to stun the opponent, and then immediately switch to Dreamcatcher to deal massive damage from her bombs that are also precision hits. So that's a really strong niche that Dreamcatcher has, but it's again quite a very narrow niche. If you're a beginner, I would not recommend you to invest in Dreamcatcher, but if you're a high level player and you find yourself needing a lot more precision damage dealers, maybe Peacock, Dreamcatcher could be another optional tool to have in your roster. Dreamcatcher with Eliza is quite a noteworthy combo. And then we have Robo Fortune. Robo Fortune is really cool. She has the ability to eject her head, and she can do these really long chain combos, but she also has the chance to start zoning the opponent from afar and killing them with projectiles. She has one of the best marquee abilities in the game by being able to just gain enrage while far from the opponent. Is really strong, and her diamond variants are also really good. The first we have is Overclocked. Overclocked is a really nice variant for a safety net. She gains precision and barrier after every 3 seconds not suffering a hit, which means gaining 5 stacks of timeless barrier is really easy with Overclock to provide you that extra health to avoid some reflect damage, bleed effects, and so forth. Now, when you have 3 stacks of precision, all of her attacks are unblockable. When she has 3 stacks of barrier, 50% of incoming damage is reflected. So obviously there's some offensive and defensive hybrid you can use with Overclocked here. In defense, while she has the ability to be defensive, she's not super great. She's not part of the meta because it's quite easy to counter her. Just remove her buffs, which is quite prevalent and pretty much a necessity if you're playing Rifts, and then she doesn't really have much going on for her. The unblockable precision is really nice. However, as of this recording, unblockable precision hits are still bugged. We have no idea when it's gonna get fixed, but until that is fixed, Overclocked is still a good variant, but definitely not the greatest. What is really good though is X-Bot. X-Bot is a simple Robo Fortune variant that gains plenty of buffs and inflicts Deathmark while she is far away from the opponent. Precision and Deathmark combined is really strong, and having the ability to gain barrier and heal for 5% health is a really nice safety net. X-Bot is the premier offensive Robo Fortune. You shoot projectiles like your laser beams from afar, and it just deals plenty of damage. It also synergizes very well with Robo Fortune's own marketability Ping Check, which gives her enrage stacks while she's far away. So all this in combination makes X-Bot a really premier offensive variant. I've made a video on her, you can see how much damage I dealt with her. She's definitely one of the best diamond variants you can invest in this game. Really strong, really powerful. And then we have Squigly. Squigly is really funny. She's a zombie, so a lot of her variants have effects revolving around nearing corpses or being dead and so forth. So it's a very thematic thing, but she also has access to really powerful debuffs like Curse and Wither in her kit. Wither and Curse basically covers her weakness as a multi-hit character, because now you don't have to worry about the opponent's meter and you don't have to worry about the opponent's buffs as long as you're able to time your debuffs and inflict them at the right time. Her kit is definitely really strong and her diamond variants are really good as well. We'll first start with Lovecrafted. Lovecrafted is the premier offensive Squigly. While near an opponent, she disables blockbusters and inflicts heal block for 1 second. Already this is meter control and the ability to counter healing variants like ICU Assassin's Creed. And all she has to do is just to be near the opponent, which means her ability is most likely going to be active while you deal combos against your opponents. Every 10th combo hit will land as a critical hit and will inflict Deathmark and Heavy Bleed for 15 seconds. Deathmark is again a nice bonus multiplier for crits, even though that's not really something you need for Lovecrafted. And the Heavy Bleed is just a really nice touch to make sure you're dealing a lot of DPS over an extended period of time. Heavy Bleed for 15 seconds basically means a 30% health decrease overall, which is quite good. There's nothing much else to be said about Lovecrafted. Squigly's base kit is already really strong and powerful, so she already has inbuilt Curse and Wither, and these utility, combined with Lovecrafted's own abilities, makes her a really strong variant to have. Definitely worth the 10 keys of investment. Then we have the defensive part with Plot Twisted. Plot Twisted, I'm just gonna say, is one of the better water diamond variants in this game. Her ability to resurrect with 5 stacks of thorns is absolutely insane and kind of crazy to face against. If you do not have an Eliza with Chaos Banish, those thorns last really long for 20 seconds. It's gonna kill you. Now she also deals 50% bonus damage for each active debuff, but that is mostly seen as like a bonus thing, you don't really strive for it, and as a defender, it's not like the AI can do much about it. Overall for a defender, I think she has gone down on popularity ever since Model Leader was released, but Squigly has really good catalysts, and combined with Frost Armor and Plot Twist's ability, you can actually delay a lot with this variant. She can revive up to 2 times from Squigly's own catalyst and Plot Twist's ability, so that's kind of insane. So you really have to use a precision hit to prevent her from doing any of this. A strong water elemental defender, and definitely better than heavy metal. Okay, so the newest update this year is that we got Umbrella as part of the roster. I've talked about Umbrella before in my other videos. Her kit is interesting, she has a lot of regeneration, access to command grabs, which makes her good, but she is a multi-hit character. And unfortunately, she has no way to control buffs. Instead, she has Slime and can inflict Slime very consistently, which damages the opponent for every buff she gets. However, in my opinion, I think Slime is currently under-tuned and could use a buff. I think Umbrella's variants will most likely depend more on their signature abilities rather than Umbrella's base kit. So we'll first start with Eager Deceiver. Well-timed blocks have a 100% chance to grant 1 stack each of Precision, Barrier, and Blessing. So the biggest point about this ability is the barrier and blessing. While precision is a really powerful buff, Umbrella doesn't really have any good ways to use precision well because she's a multi-hit character, and some of her moves are grabs so it can't crit anyway. The only move that I think can use precision well is Slurp and Slide. But aside from that, I think it's good to think of this ability purely more for a defensive safety net that is nice but not really necessary since Umbrella already has a lot of regeneration in her kit. Her second signature ability is where she shines the most. 50% chance when using a blockbuster while Ravenous to convert 3 buffs into permanent enrage. So you'll notice that the second signature ability is very reminiscent of Djinn Frizz. Djinn Frizz has a 33% chance, which I personally find to be a bit inconsistent, but maybe Eager Deceiver, 50% chance, is obviously much higher and will happen more often, which makes her quite powerful. I think the biggest advantage Umbrella has over Filia is the fact that Umbrella has access to command grabs. Tongue Twister is a very powerful command grab blockbuster. And furthermore, unlike Djinn Frizz, Umbrella's marketability can also grant her enrage stacks, which means that Umbrella also has other ways to gain buffs without relying on her first signature ability. There's more opportunities to convert those buffs into enrage, which makes me think that Eager Deceiver could be better than Djinn Frizz. However, I do not have Eager Deceiver to confirm this, so this is still very theoretical on my part. Next, we have Reigning Champ, and this is the quintessential defensive variant for every new character release. Reigning Champ being a light variant obviously provides some synergy points with the light elemental catalyst, but her role is mostly as a support. While Umbrella is alive, teammates gain haste and final stand for 10 seconds every 20 seconds. I personally think 20 seconds is a bit long, but when you're facing against defenders like Splitting Image, Dream Band, I could imagine 20 seconds can get by really fast because defeating those guys in 20 seconds is a stretch, it's gonna be hard. So Reigning Champ could definitely play a role there. But I have alluded to this before that light defensive nodes have gotten a bit unpopular lately. This might change, and Reigning Champ so far I have not faced her in battle yet. She's still quite new. Not a lot of people have her or have the sets to support her in defense, and so her viability in the meta is still very questionable. I do have to mention that Umbrella at defense can be quite scary. She has plenty of projectiles to harass you from afar and making it hard for you to get close, and she has a really weird hitbox, so it might not be the easiest character to intercept with. She definitely has potential to be meta, but as of right now, I'm not really seeing it and there's still a lot of uncertainty. If you pull a Reigning Champ, feel free to test her out in Rift battles and see how she performs, but I can't provide a clear indication on whether or not she'll be good. And finally, we have Death Wish, and Death Wish is a lot. She's probably the strongest Umbrella variant in this entire game because her abilities is a freaking essay. It's so much things all in one. Let's talk about the first one. Every 7th combo hit landed on Umbrella or the opponent transfers up to 3 enemy buffs to herself and inflicts Hex for 10 seconds. This is a crazy combination of abilities because not only is she stealing buffs, she's also inflicting Hex, which means opponents that has immunity is not immune to this. You're stealing their immunity and inflicting Hex. Hex is a very powerful debuff. This alone makes Death Wish a really strong diamond variant regardless of what her character is. And being an Umbrella, landing 7 combo hits is super easy. She has access to command grabs, and she also has plenty of regeneration in her kit. Her second ability is more defensive. When she dies, she resurrects herself and revives all teammates at 25% health. So this gives me Plot Twisted vibes, even though it's more like a stronger version of Plot Twisted. It's kind of crazy. Just like Reigning Champ, we don't know how Death Wish will perform on defense. She's very new. She literally got released like 5 days ago, so we still don't know. But because of her dark element, I don't think she's gonna be that crazy. Dark is not a popular element for defense, but her resurrection ability is definitely something to watch out for. She also gains Miasma, but I feel like that's more of a bonus thing and it's not something you need to look out for. So I think you can ignore that part. If you happen to pull a Death Wish, you should be very proud and be very happy because that first signature ability carries her so hard and it's crazy. She's amazing. I believe Death Wish is just insane. Finally, we've come to the last character, which is Valentine. So Valentine is a healer and disabler. She has a lot of ways to inflict tons of different debuffs, while also healing teammates a lot and reviving them from the field. She's a really good support character in that way, and she's just overall a strong character with a strong base kit. She's got a lot of tools to make up for some variants' weaknesses, but man, the diamond variants of Valentine is another level. All three of them are really good and stands on their own feet. We'll first start with Assassin's Greed. Assassin's Greed is the defender for Valentine, and she has an insane way to punish opponents that uses a blockbuster. Opponents immediately lose 25% of their remaining health and suffer heavy bleed for 5 seconds. That is crazy and makes defeating her perfectly in Rift battles a bit of a challenge. Furthermore, she also has insane regeneration by gaining 5% health per second while nearby an opponent suffering bleed. Assassin's Greed is definitely a really good defender to have. She's a light variant, which means synergy with Light Catalyst, and she's definitely worth the 10 diamond keys. Then we move on to Chic. I've been practicing my pronunciation of this variant for literally months, and I hope I get that right, maybe not. Anyway, she's the premier offensive variant for Valentine, and she's quite crazy herself too. She has a defensive side by gaining barrier, thorns, and armor while at her own side of the stage, but you can kind of just ignore that part because her main use is in her second signature ability, where critical hits inflict bleed, death mark, or armor break for 10 seconds. Armor break removes armor and increases the damage taken by the opponent by 20%. Death mark increases critical damage by 50%. And of course, we all know about bleed is just a really good debuff in high prize fight streaks. This combination and the fact that Valentine has access to counter venoms means Chic can deal a lot of burst damage, and if it's critical hits, she starts destroying teams. It's absolutely insane. In my opinion, one of the greatest diamond variants for offense, and Valentine's kit provides her with other utility as well, such as regeneration, which is a huge thing at the moment. And finally, we have Wetwork. So I have been playing Wetwork for a while, and I actually made a whole video of her, and she does a lot of damage as well. She can deal just as much damage as Chic because she also inflicts armor break and death mark through her ability. The only difference is that she also can gain enrage, and then she has a charge attack ability that provides her stacks of evasion. This evasion on a Valentine is really cool. You can start spamming your charge attacks every time a new opponent comes in, and it's just a unique way of playing Valentine. I really enjoy playing her. If we were to compare, Chic is more simpler to use, and so I give her bonus points for that, but Wetwork, while a bit more technical, provides more utility from that evasion and charge attack, and the fact that she inflicts both armor break and death mark in one go is also a really good combination. I really like Wetwork. She's almost on par with Chic, but I slightly think Chic might be a bit better, but that's just personal preference. Wetwork is still a very powerful and strong diamond variant to have, especially on the offensive side. Alright y'all, so that is gonna be the end of this video. I've reviewed all the diamond variants in this game, and man, that's a lot. That is a lot. So I did it slightly different this time around. I think last year what I did was I just had one question: is it worth the 10 diamond keys of investment? And I go for a yes or a no. This time around, I'm changing it up a bit. I'm providing you that little gray area in between for you to consider yourself. There's definitely more context in this one, and I hope I've done a better job. Please do leave a comment to let me know what you think about this. Is this a good approach? Should I go back to the previous one and make like hard rules of yes or no? And I'd like to hear your thoughts about it. I might do the same thing again for next year, especially when we know that Black Dahlia is coming this year. With that said, I've rambled on too much. I'm tired. Thank you all so much for watching, and hope to see you in the next video.